Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for taking out this time to join this webinar exclusively for Federal Bank clients on a Saturday afternoon. My name is Ankur Maheshwari, and I represent Equirus Wealth. Over the last couple of months, markets have been going through extremely turbulent phase, whether it is equity, fixed income, currency, and commodities. I think all asset classes have been seeing a fairly turbulent phase in the market. Uh, and I'm sure this would have led to a lot of anxiousness, queries in your minds, which you would be wanting to, get clarified or hear views or thoughts around those queries that you have. So today, to address that, we have with us Mr. Ashish Somaya. Ashish is the MD and CEO of Motilal Oswal AMC. He shall be sharing his views, insights, and thoughts on various asset classes and specifically equity markets. Ashish is a veteran in this industry, has around 20 years of experience, and runs one of the largest AMCs in the country on the PMS and mutual fund side. So, without any further delay, I would like to hand it over to Ashish to take it ahead. Just as a matter of Q&A session, once Ashish is done with his part of the speech, I'll request you to please use your chat window to ask any questions that you may have, and then we'll pick it up one by one. So thank you very much. And with that, over to you, Ashish.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Ankur. Thank you, everybody, for giving me the opportunity, for sparing your time and logging on, and for giving me the opportunity to speak to all of you. It is indeed a pleasure. And, like Ankur has already set the agenda, for the first few minutes, I'll be sharing my thoughts and my understanding of what is happening in the equity markets. And then, of course, I'm here to answer your questions. So, I think that, um, yeah, just a minute, please. Yeah. Yeah. So there are a few things which I want to share about the markets first, and then I will come to the Q&A part of the session where I'll be happy to answer any questions as far as markets or investments are concerned. I think that, in the current scenario, I'm sure everybody consumes a lot of news and everybody is having all the same news sources that I may be referring to. But still, I think that, in terms of the current scenario, there are two or three things that we are dealing with out here, specifically three things. One clearly is the virus and the spread of the virus. Uh, Second is that, of course, in order to control the spread of the virus, all of us are practicing social distancing, which is resulting in complete stoppage of people to people connect. And obviously, we are not able to attend our offices or meet people, may it be business relationships or whichever way. So, one is the virus. Second is the economic impact of the virus, because if businesses are being put to a halt, and if a lockdown has been put in place in order to practice social distancing of the highest order, then obviously there is an economic fallout. So first is the virus, second is the economic fallout of the virus, and third clearly is the stock market impact of this entire pandemic. So we are dealing with the virus, we are dealing with the economic impact, and we are dealing with the stock market. But in reality, if you observe what has been happening, things haven't, I mean, these are the three things that we are talking about. They are correlated with one another, but the real impact hasn't played out in the order in which I actually described to you. So let me elaborate a bit on this. If you really look at it in true earnest, in right earnest, the lockdown started from 23rd of March 2020. And when the lockdown was announced, it was seen to be a reasonably proactive kind of step, because we had barely about 500 infections at that point in time. And we had a very low number of actual fatalities or casualties at that point in time. But on the other hand, on 23rd of March, which I would say was the early days of this infection, at least as far as India is concerned, and when the lockdown hadn't even started. So 23rd March, our stock market hit a kind of a low. We were at about 7,600 on the Nifty. And if you just kind of jog back, you might have seen that we were approximately 12,400 on the Nifty somewhere in the middle of February. So in a span of 1 month, we lost nearly 40% on the Nifty. But in this 1 month, the virus barely made any inroads into India. We had hardly 500 infections and practically negligible amount of casualties. And then we announced a lockdown. Now, on the other hand, what is counterintuitive is that actually when the virus started accelerating, and actually now that we have, nearly 6 weeks of the lockdown already, quite counterintuitively or quite ironically, the market has actually gone up more than 20%. So, what is interesting is that even before the lockdown and even before the virus became a significant issue, we were already 40% down. And now that the virus is a significant issue and we are living through a lockdown, it's ironical, but the market is up 20%. So, what is causing this kind of behavior? Because a lot of times, what would happen is that a lot of people would think that when the market was falling, I should have actually removed my money and I should have kept it aside. Now, based on the description, what I just gave you, what would have happened is that by the time you reacted, because the market was 40% down in about 3 weeks actually, by the time you reacted, the market would have gone down. And by the time you actually reacted, post that the market would have gone up nearly 20%. That is how the sequence of events has actually played out. Because all of us started to realize somewhere in March that, okay, the virus has hit Indian shores, and more and more countries are going through a lockdown, and eventually we might have our lockdown. But by that point in time, the index was already 30 to 40% down, and by the time you could really get scared and start thinking of doing something, the index has actually gone up 20% in the reverse direction. So 12,400 became 7,600, and that 7,600 as we speak, yesterday, day before yesterday, sorry, was nearly 9,800 or 9,900. So it's not even 20% actually, it's 25% kind of number. So what is causing this kind of behavior in the market? And for that I need to share an interesting piece of data with you, and you will be surprised to know that practically this is how things tend to play out. So there is a chart out here. I will explain to you in detail what this chart has line by line, and then I'll bring out a couple of important points which I want to share with you. So if you see this chart, only India is out here, which has been shown in different colors. But otherwise, the chart has two bars. It has blue bars and it has red bars. And in India's case, the blue bar has been made into kind of a light blue, and the red has been made into a kind of orangish tone. But suffice it to say, India is presented in a different color, so you can distinctively see, whereas all other countries are in blue and red bars. And what do these blue and red bars actually tell you? They tell you what is the decline in the stock market index of various countries. So there is Brazil on the right, there is Russia on the left, and in between you have India, France, Germany. S&P 500 of course is US, and then Japan and Taiwan and South Korea and all these markets. So what this chart shows is it shows the fall in the index of each of these countries. Fall at what point in time? It shows the fall at two different occasions. The blue bars are representing the fall of the index in 2008, 2009, when we had the global financial crisis, or what we call the Lehman crisis, or whatever it is. And the red bars, orange in India's case, is showing you the fall in 2020 amidst this corona crisis. So what is the learning from this chart? Why have I presented this chart right up front in our discussion? The reason is to explain that, when this kind of a scenario comes up, all of us as investors, me included, because I am not here talking to you merely as a stock market guy. I'm also talking to you as a fellow investor, because my company has very large investments in every product that our clients invest. And I'm myself a co-investor in all our mutual funds and PMSs. So I'm not talking purely as a stock market guy, but also as a co-investor in my personal capacity as well as my corporate capacity. What we have learned is that whenever these kind of scenarios come up, it is very, very natural for all of us to start thinking that, am I in the right portfolio? Am I in the right sector? Because if you see, if you are an equity investor, then in February and March, what you've seen happening in your portfolio can be quite disturbing, to say the least. So at these times, it's very normal for all of us to start thinking that, am I in the right portfolio? Am I in the right fund? Has my advisor told me the right things? Am I in the right sector? So these are the kind of questions which do come up, and they are all perfectly right or perfectly natural questions to crop up in our thought process. But why am I presenting this chart to you first up is because this chart will actually make you think that probably the right question is not whether I'm in the right fund or the right sector. Probably the right question is, am I on the right planet and am I in the right asset class? What is the reason for this? I'm not saying this on a lighter note or something. The data actually shows this. The data actually shows that in 2008, 2009, it just did not matter whether uh, you are in the US where the crisis started, or whether you are India or Korea or Taiwan or China. It doesn't matter who you are. When the Lehman crisis hit upon us, every market fell 40 to 60%, 50 to 60%, every market fell. Now, when you come to 2020 and the Corona crisis, again, what this data tells us is that it doesn't matter whether you're South Korea, who has supposedly some control on the virus, or of course you're Taiwan, which has complete control on the virus, or you're Europe or US, which is absolutely out of control, or maybe you are India, which is not as great as Taiwan, but definitely we're not as bad as Europe and US. So it just doesn't matter who you are. In 2008, every market was 50 to 60% down. And again, it just doesn't matter who you are. Every market in 2020 is in the range of 30 to 40% down. And believe you me, after this 25th March bottom or 23rd March bottom, what you will find is that practically all markets are up 20% from the bottom. So what is the reason for this? Why does it happen to why does it have to happen this way? Because intuitively, we all know that even if it is Lehman crisis or it is this Corona crisis, we all know that the impact on every market is not the same. The impact on different markets will eventually be very, very different. But why is it that every market has fallen the same? The reason is that when there is panic, equity markets, like for example, uh, let us say that you are dealing in, say, automobiles, or you're dealing in some other goods or services. What you will find is that all the prices may not be correlated. So how much a car costs in India versus how much the same car costs in US, you will find it very difficult to explain a correlation between the two prices. But if you talk about equity markets, what you will find is that the prices do get correlated. In the long run, different economies function differently, different countries function differently. But in the short run, the global emerging market is basically one market. And Europe and the US are the epicenter of global investing. So bulk of the money in equities which is invested globally is actually invested through global centers like London or New York or Boston or whatever you may have come across. And in the month of March, nearly 100 billion US dollars was withdrawn from global equity markets. Why was it withdrawn? Because as you might have noticed, in the end of February and March, the virus started to travel, from China to Asia, but more importantly through the Middle East and Europe and US. Europe and US have been massively impacted, and they are countries which would anyway be massively impacted because they are the developed world. And countries like India, which are called developing world or emerging markets or poor countries, so to speak, definitely we would have different impact, and more importantly, we would have lesser impact. Now, this is not a self-serving statement, but what is the reason? Let me explain that. Countries like India are called economy of essentials. What do I mean by economy of essentials? Is that our per capita income is about 2000 US dollars. And out of this 2000 US dollars, we are spending approximately 1400 to $1500 for food, shelter, and clothing, or basically what we call the basic amenities, rote kapda makan. Whereas if you take an example of US, these kind of countries, I mean, especially US, for instance, per capita income is over 60,000 US dollars. And of course, you can imagine, and you must have traveled and you must have seen also, that out of the 60,000 US dollars, it might be that about 20, $25,000 might be their cost of survival. But as you can imagine, there is a very, very high proportion which goes away, uh, which goes with the disposable income. And when we talk about the basics in India, of course, disposable incomes are low and maximum money goes towards survival. But as you can imagine in Europe and US, and this doesn't need me to tell you, even in your travel, you might have seen anecdotally that there is a lot of spend which actually goes into discretion. So we could be termed as an economy of essentials, whereas a lot of these advanced economies could be termed as an economy of discretion. So for example, it's not just food, shelter, and clothing, but within food, shelter, clothing also, you might find that there could be a lot more what we loosely term as a higher standard of living. So what does it mean by higher standard of living? So even for the basic amenities, you might see more value addition happening. Even for the non-basic amenities, for example, you know for a fact that a lot of these economies are heavily entrenched into tourism and travel. For example, a lot of these economies have a lot of spend on luxury goods, on higher value consumption, on higher value consumption of media, on spending on automobiles and travel, tourism, like I already mentioned. So the point is that the consumption is of a higher order, the standard of living is of a higher order. And what you will notice is that if the level of spend itself is so much higher, if the level of spend itself is so much higher, then automatically you can imagine that the fall could be that much higher. So if you see, even now when you hear these global agencies like the IMFs and the World Banks of this world, when they're talking about economic projections, for countries like India, they are saying that, yeah, well, we were growing nearly 5% year on year, and we might now grow at 0.5%, 1%, or 2%. Kind of, forecasts are going in that particular band. But when you look at the Western world, what is the prognosis? The US was growing at say 3 to 4%, and the discussion which is now happening is that forget growth, they might have -10, -12 kind of percentage, and their economy might actually shrink, and they might actually see a recessionary trend in the near future. So the point to keep in mind is that we know intuitively that the impact on different economies is different, but when there is panic, when there is a sense of uncertainty, and when people would like to reduce their risk, when they are selling, they are not discerning. It's not like somebody, this data clearly will tell you, it's not like somebody is waking up in the morning and deciding that India is a bad market, let me specifically remove my money from India. It doesn't happen that way. If $100 billion is withdrawn from the global equity markets, then it's quite natural to understand that about $8 to $10 billion would get pulled out of India. Because in fact, a lot of the money which comes in is actually coming in as a combined block. So if somebody sitting in New York puts his or her money into a global equity fund, then that $100 going to global equity fund will have some $3 to $4 coming into India. If they put $100 into a global emerging market fund, then you will find that $7 8 comes to India. If they decide to put money into a BRICS fund, you might find that some $20 comes into India. So the thing is that we are part of a global equity market, and when money gets pulled out, at that point in time, things do get correlated. When people are removing money from global equity markets, it is but natural that they might remove some money from India. Now the question is, what is likely from here on? What do we have to look forward to? Is this happening for the first time? What is it that we should expect from here on, right? And I'll come to the more India specific things also. But first, my intention is to explain to you where this has started. A lot of these things, as you can imagine, they are not forecastable in advance. But for us to understand what we should do next, it's very important to at least do a diagnosis of what has happened, and now we can understand that what is likely to happen next up from here. So the interesting part is that this is not something which is happening for the first time. It has happened in the past also. And here is an example. So in the previous chart, I already showed you that what was the decline in the world markets in 2008 when there was the Lehman crisis, and in 2020 when we are amidst this particular corona crisis. So in this corona crisis, like I told you, in the month of March, we saw outflow of about 8 to 9 billion US dollars. It was not drawn out over a period of time. It was very short and swift in a span of 3 to 4 weeks, and that caused a faster decline in the markets. The point is, this is not for the first time. It has happened in 2008 also, in 2001 also. In 2001, it was a terror attack, which then became a Gulf War. In 2008, it was a credit crisis, which resulted into a financial crisis. And in 2020, it's a corona crisis, which is resulting in this lockdown and hence another kind of stock market correction. Now, in 2008, we lost about 12 billion US dollars, and that time our market declined by about 50 to 60%, as I already described to you. And the data here will also tell you that our currency declined by about 23% in the year 2008. What is interesting is what happened afterwards. Because what I told you is that when people are in a bit of a panic, when people are withdrawing, they are not being discerning or choosy. Because a lot of the money gets invested as a block. It is what we call a global risk off kind of behavior. So when people are withdrawing, it's not like they are actually being choosy about it. They are withdrawing across the board. But eventually the dust settles, right? Eventually, when, for example, central banks take charge, all this fiscal stimulus and zero interest rates and liquidity infusion and all the state support, it starts to work. So what do I mean by dust settles? So first is, like I already told you, that the central banks and governments start to intervene. They try to shelter the economy from very high impact. They come out with, zero interest rates, very high liquidity, different types of bailouts to different segments to give them economic support. This time around, of course, there is a health crisis, and a virus is a natural process. Over a period of time, viruses are known to lose their virulence, or some drugs start working, or some vaccine gets invented, or seasonal patterns change, or some populations start to put up a bit more resistance as compared to some other populations. But eventually, at some point in time, as you'll appreciate, this virus is not something which is a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year phenomenon. It is a 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, or 6 weeks, or 8 weeks kind of phenomena. And it has happened in the past also. 2002, 2003, there was a SARS. 2012, there was a MERS, which fortunately didn't reach India. But at different points in time, different viruses have played out. And it is usually a couple of months to 3 months. For example, I have lived through SARS. I was myself supposed to be based in Hong Kong and Singapore for 2 to 3 months. And I had to cancel that entire assignment because of the SARS. And it finally it was completely forgotten in a matter of 3 to 6 months. And after that, I was again in Hong Kong for a period of 3 months, continuing with my assignment as if nothing had happened. So these viruses are a natural process. Over a period of time, either some drugs start to work, or it comes into control, or the spread kind of gets arrested, which is what people loosely refer as flattening the curve. So long story short is that eventually the dust settles. When the dust settles, what do people see? When the dust settles, people will see that, when this lockdown was prevalent, different countries had different economies had different impact. I already explained one difference to you, which is that we are like a country which is an economy of essentials, and a lot of these advanced countries with very high standard of living and very high discretionary spends, they are economy of discretion. So that is one difference. But that apart, as you'll appreciate, for example, countries like India, we are also an emerging market. And a lot of emerging markets are dependent on exports to the Western world. A lot of emerging markets are, their fortunes are linked to some commodities. India is also an emerging market, but export is not the biggest part of our economy, so to speak. A lot of the stuff we export, like IT services, is contractual in nature. And a lot of our dependence for capital is from external sources. So when the world has very high liquidity and practically zero interest rates, it benefits us, and that is something which is visible in this chart also. It's not directly visible, but I can give you examples. If you see 2015, 16, 17, and 18, when the US economy was booming, their stock markets were performing very, very well. The dollar was appreciating, or it had an appreciating bias vis-a-vis other countries. And at the same time, they were raising interest rates. So in those years, the flow of capital was reversed, meaning that instead of emerging markets, Western markets were attracting a lot more of the flows. And you can see it in the data that 2015, 16, 17, 18, India practically did not get equity inflows. And that was true even of the bond market. But if you see 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, most of these years, when the US was coming out of a recessionary trend, when the dollar had a depreciating bias, when their interest rates were practically zero, at those points in time, the flow was reversed. It was money was moving out of those countries and money was moving into emerging markets. So what you will find is that when the US economy has slowed down, when their markets, when their economy is under pressure, when they made interest rates zero, liquidity is awash. Right now, there is a bit of a risk aversion, which is why the dollar is holding up. But at some point in time, you might see that the flow of money will reverse. Now, in 2008, in 1 year, we lost 12 billion US dollars and our market declined. But as I described to you a process, which I said when the dust settles, eventually what happens is that in 2009 and 2010, we actually got back $48 billion of FII flows. And mind you, in the last 10 years, there has never been a single year or a pair of years where we ever saw this kind of flows. So to sum it up, past history shows that whenever the market depreciates significantly, whenever there is this kind of a global crisis, it happened in 2002 and 3. Data is not here, but we know because we've lived through it. It happened in 2002, 2003. It happened in 2008 and 9. And it is likely to happen again in 2020, which is that when the external environment becomes quite challenging, on a relative basis, we stand to benefit. And whenever our currency depreciates and the market declines, and whenever your FII flows, with some lag effect, the FII flow actually comes back. And let me tell you a very, very much more practical interpretation of this. For example, if you look at Maruti as a company, it is the largest automaker in India with more than 50% market share. Now, the auto sector in India has been going through its own challenges. So even before this virus impact came, at different points in time, we have seen, Maruti share price was close to 10,000 at the peak. And then we saw it going to 5,500, 6,000, and then it settled at about 7,300. Now, when COVID-19 came, the price went all the way to, at the bottom, it went all the way to 4,000 rupees. Now, if you are a foreigner and you are looking at India, then imagine what you are seeing. You are seeing that the largest automaker in the country, the share price has gone down 60%. And on top of it, in the last 15 months, our currency has fallen 20%. So a company which has 37,000 crores of cash in its balance sheet, which is still more than 50% market share of India and of the Indian auto market, dominant for last 30 years, maybe nearly 40 years actually. And there, for 1 quarter or 1 year of bad performance, the share price is nearly 80% down in dollar terms. So these are, what I've described to you is more macro. But if you are looking at it at a micro level, what happens from a foreign investor's perspective, and whenever the currency depreciates dramatically, when the market depreciates significantly, with some lag effect, why do these things start to look more attractive? I think that is something which I have just tried to give a more practical explanation. So like I said, what we are seeing right now is not something which has happened for the first time. I know it can be disconcerting in the short term, but the idea is not to react to these kind of situations. I am equally mindful that it is easy for me to say one should not react. it is very, very difficult for people to practice or adhere to this kind of thought process. But in reality, there is something to look forward to, which is why I said that one should not panic. So, what do we mean by saying that there is something to look forward to? There's this last piece of data that I would like to share with you going back to our previous sheet. So, in the last 30 years, there are 6 instances when the market has declined 30, 40, 50% from its peak. And what we've done is that we just try to figure out that whenever the market declines so sharply, what happens after that? So what this data will tell you is that when the market declines so sharply from the peak, whenever it hits the bottom, 1 year from there, you can see what happens in this right-hand side column. Now, a disclaimer to keep in mind is that right now we don't know where is the bottom, because a month back we were 7,600 and now we are 9,800, and it's quite likely that Monday the market could go down. But still it would be say 9,400 or whatever the number would be. And now the government has slowly started to roll back on the lockdown. I think one thing to keep in mind: don't go by yesterday's headlines, because it says lockdown is extended, but in reality, even as they say lockdown is extended, for most parts of the country there are certain relaxations which have been announced. That's okay. We are not making any conjecture on markets. To keep in mind just that right now we don't know where the bottom is. But what this data actually shows, that even if wherever the bottom may be, even if the bottom is say 10% lower than where you are, what this data shows is that once you hit the bottom, 1 year from there, there tends to be a significant recovery. And this is not just some crystal ball gazing. There is a science behind it, and the science is that markets are cyclical in nature, and the best visual representation of a cyclical behavior is how a pendulum swings. So if you can imagine how a pendulum swings, there is an axis about which the pendulum swings to the left and then swings to the right. Now, if you imagine that a right swing is a positive trajectory in the markets, and you imagine that a left swing is a negative trajectory in the markets, then what you will see is that whenever the market swings significantly to the left, eventually it swings back towards the center. And more interestingly, when it swings back towards the center, it doesn't stop at the center. It actually swings towards the right. So what you should keep in mind is that even before COVID-19 hit us, it's not like our market was on some trailblazing kind of movement. The fact is that even before COVID-19 hit us, for the previous 2 years, from 2018 to 2020, our aggregate market cap actually declined. That may not be reflected in the Nifty going to 12,000, because Nifty is obviously a more large cap frontline index, and it's very well published and appear and very well covered in media, that a lot of the Nifty movement was on account of top 4-5 stocks, where the movement actually got concentrated. But the real number is that the 2 years before this COVID-19 came, we were any which way, our market was not like some massively expensive, exaggerated market. We were already on an aggregate basis. Previous 2 years, we had lost market cap value. We could see that small and mid caps were actually, barring August 2019 to Feb 2020, there was a massive recovery. But barring that, small caps and mid caps haven't delivered in the last 3 years. Our aggregate market cap to GDP even before this fall was 69%. And when the market hit 7,600, it went to about 47% market cap to GDP. And even now we are around 55 to 57%, or maybe 55% market cap to GDP. So, and we were economically, if you see, we were at a cyclical bottom. The government was already having a accommodative or expansionary stance on the fiscal. The RBI was obviously pumping in liquidity and cutting rates even before COVID-19 hit us. After that, it has only gone up actually. So what I'm trying to say is that you can imagine that a market which was any which way below fair value has got further pushed down. And the correct way to visualize is that if you keep a spring compressed beyond a point, eventually it recoils. So when a spring is compressed, definitely the spring shrinks in size, but it stores more value. And that is how one must see the current scenario. Last part, I have just explained to you market behavior and how we should actually visualize it. I'm not trying to say that 6 weeks of lockdown by no stretch of imagination one can say that we should not examine that impact. Clearly, one has to understand what kind of impact this will have. In my understanding, different sectors have different impact, so we should not generalize this. But when we speak about sectors, I think there are some sectors where there is a demand destruction. So if it's an airline or a hotel, 6 weeks of lockdown means the aircrafts are grounded. So obviously, these 6 weeks, and even further more time till the time that they are grounded. So let us say it is 2 months or 3 months or whatever it may be. The fact is that certain sectors, they have a demand destruction because these days are not going to come back. So that revenue lost is lost and that inventory lost is lost. It won't come back. There are certain sectors where it's more like a demand postponement. The demand doesn't get destroyed, but it gets postponed. So white goods, consumer discretionary, automobiles are all such examples. And staying with the example of automobiles, any which way in the last 12 to 15 months, because of floods across the country, credit crisis or availability of credit, in between oil prices went to $88. Then there was insurance premium being hiked, road tax and registration charges went up, and of course we have been through a BS4 BS6 transition. So if you see automobiles, interesting fact is that 50% of all automobile demand is actually for replacement. It is not new buying. So 50% is replacement, and on an average 4.5 years is the time cycle in which people actually replace their automobiles. In the last 1 year, the auto volumes have gone down. Replacement has been pushed forward, and this 4.5 year has now become more like 5.5 years in terms of postponement of demand. At the other side of the tunnel, when we move out of this whole COVID related era, what we will find is that banks would be desperate to lend, or they would need to lend. The reason being that in this period, the RBI has pumped in liquidity. They have cut interest rates. Everybody has put money into the bank. Businesses are shut, and for a bank, it's very important to lend, because if they have money, if they have high liquidity, the net interest margins would be under pressure. And it's important to, the way to make money is to start lending. In a risk averse environment, industries will come back when they come back on stream. But one of the places where banks do lend is to individuals. And wherever there is a demand, anything which is dependent on credit availability and interest rates, that is likely to see some kind of revival in the next 6 to 9 months. So there'll be many sectors which will not have demand destruction, but they will more likely have demand postponement. Then there are sectors like pharma and FMCG. Yes, there are supply chains and demand and production. Some of those things do go through disruption. But net one can imagine that they are ultimately dealing with essentials. So there is a limit to how much they can get impacted. Then of course there's the financial sector. Broadly, it works on a spread. The rate at which they take money versus the rate at which they lend money. That's the spread they make. When there is economic disruption, there is a risk that non-performing assets may escalate. But I think that real impact we will only know maybe by the month of September or so, because right now there is a moratorium, and then 90 days after that, if the loans are not paid, only then there is a risk of it become NPA. But the point is that eventually, not everything is unsecured. A lot of these banks have very strong balance sheets, so they are in a position to handle some of these escalations. It's not the first time that this is happening. But most importantly, what you should keep in mind is that while there is a risk of slippages, what we should keep in mind is that on the other hand, for most sectors, the prices are already down by 40, 50, 60%. And there is a way to look at prices, because typically when you look at a company, the market value of the company is what the market capitalization is. And bulk of this market value actually comes from the future earnings power. Right now, a lot of these values are 40, 50, 60% down. So what we have to sit back and think is that 1 quarter of disruption or 1 year of poor earnings, what proportion of the value deserves to be knocked down? So if we believe that bulk of the market capitalization is for the future earnings power, then for 1 year of bad earning or 1 quarter of disruption, how much of this future earning power should be discounted? Does it have to be discounted by 50%? Is it overdone or is it underdone? That is something which is food for thought. So for the next 3 to 6 months, there would be volatility as the market tries to assimilate the impact of a lot of these things that I have told you. My sense is that if we are looking at 1 year ahead from here, we will be in a much better scenario, and hence I would repeat that this is not a time to really panic. Anybody who follows asset allocation, they might have seen that the equity allocation has quite involuntarily come down because of the mark to market impact. I think people should look to rebalance the allocation, but not urgently. Maybe spread the rebalancing over the next 3 to 6 months. Uh, Anybody who is looking to invest again should not jump in. There will be corrections from time to time. And next 3 to 6 months, one should actually spread that deployment. But there will be many people who are already existing investors, and they are neither in a mood to rebalance the allocation nor in a mood to add, which could be understandable actually. Many people would not find themselves in a position to take advantage of what is happening. So even if you don't take advantage of what is happening, the least I would urge is that we should not panic. This is not the first time that it is happening, and the swiftness and the sharpness with which this decline has happened, there is an equally good chance of a retracement a few weeks or months down the line. So that is where I would stop my, sorry for a long winded monologue, but this is where I'll take a